Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. My name is Sky, VashSky, and with me, the one, the only, the Spectre with the golden nectar.
Now, pay attention, 007.
I'm paying attention, that's for sure. It's been quite the interesting week in news, hasn't it, on this front?
Well, it's just another day in the life of the biz. But it is interesting that the people who said, "You're a bunch of idiots," suddenly said, on the other hand, if you pay me $1 billion, maybe you're not such idiots. Maybe I don't need the aggravation anymore, and you can keep on paying me, and what the hell?
$1 billion. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a spin-off reference right there. But
without this, there wouldn't have been that, probably. So there you go.
I love it. Before we get to our James Bond coverage, we have to both say hi to everybody who is watching us. Hello there. I see some faces. Definitely I recognize some people completely new to the show, so thank you so much for joining in. Oh, wait. Hold on a second here. We have right at the gate. Thank you so much. With Mark Daly with $10. Thank you. R.I.P. James Bond. Pour one out for 007. 63 years, 24 movies, countless villains vanquished, and beautiful women seduced, and looking stylish doing it. Nobody did it better.
Mark, I saw what you did there at the end. Nobody did it better. Made you feel, what was it? Something for the rest. Sad for the rest. That was what it was. We may feel sad for the rest of what comes next, but we'll see, I guess. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it backstage, actually, Lou and I, and we're pretty much simpatico with where we think the future of James Bond will actually end up being. But before we get to that, we actually have to say, hello, Deborah, by the way. We have to actually talk about the box office a little bit right here. Not going to spend too much time on it, of course, because we've got a lot of James Bond goodness to get to. But I just want to go ahead and put this up on screen right now because, well, Sundays we have the distinct privilege of actually seeing those weekend box office results. And what do you know? They just came in for Captain America Brave New World. A 68% drop in its second weekend, according here to Variety. Lou, I wanted to ask you, obviously, the comic book film series of movies have been huge for Hollywood, have essentially transformed the industry, and I would say Marvel doing it single or solo, single-handedly, I should say. Do you feel that the enthusiasm for superhero films in general could be impacted by this, and maybe it's already dropped off?
Well, I heard Pro, and I guess you were involved in that one too, I think, that I was listening to, saying, well, it's kind of like what happened to the Western. But what happened to the Western was sci-fi. See, stranger rides into town, vanquishes the baddies, leaves, and they wanted to thank him. They were Westerns. They were Westerns. So whether this was the evolution of science fiction, sort of, kind of, maybe, but I do think there's a level of fatigue that sets in. But it doesn't set in. It's funny if the movies are good. Funny thing about that, nobody gets tired, bored, or rejection of good stories, i.e., regardless of whether they're wearing funny suits and latex or not, a character you care about, a situation that puts them in danger, a resolution, save the girl or the guy or whoever, and everybody lives happily ever after. That seems to have sort of wandered, doesn't it? And audiences, I don't think, are rejecting heroes as much as they are the lack of heroism. But that's just me.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of this very nihilistic take on these comic book movies, which are supposed to be very, I don't know. They're supposed to transcend culture and time, and yet they seem to be brought down by both of them. And it's really
except isn't it funny that other than a very rare few anime things that have broken out into the wider world, all of them seems to have come from the USA. All comic book characters. I mean, even when you go to the British spin-offs or others, the French gave us Tintin and Asterisk, but that's not superheroes. Um, I don't know what the Germans gave us. I guess we don't want to know. And no knock if anybody's listening from Germany. I appreciate the situation, but still, I guess, in the sense that there's a lot of envy out there from other nations, cultures, whatever. It's the characters you love to hate in a certain sense for them. And that, of course, affects the worldwide box office. And certainly, as we've seen with Disney, which owns Marvel, cozying up to the Chinese and giving credits to the people that run the concentration camps in the movie, saying, thank you so much for your help making this movie. I don't know what they were thinking, but it wasn't clear. They were confused. And we've seen the results. But enough of that. What's interesting to me is that when it comes to franchises, as we call them now, these are not the oldest. These are not the strongest. These are not the ones that have lasted the longest amount of time. The one we're going to discuss today is, and it seems to be being taken over by the same kind of mentality. So I do not have positive anticipation for it, so we'll see. Anyway.
I don't have positive anticipation for it either. To round out this story, yes, Hollywood, definitely the leading export, at least of culture anyway, from America. Usually, anyway. If you believe the Chinese numbers coming out for NASA too, maybe that's
which
changing,
I don't believe any Chinese numbers. It's funny how a nation that basically invented the abacus can't do math.
Or maybe they can do it really well. Maybe they can do it really well. You can see right here, it's performing below expectations right now. It has taken days for it to achieve the same box office result that Ant-Man Quantumania did back in 2023 when that
and
film
that's
was released.
Not figuring for inflation, is it? Or
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
100%. So it is doing very, very terribly. We'll have to see. I mean, I think this could do damage to the wider comic book universe. I don't know. I mean, James Gunn's, his Superman might be impacted by this. I think there's a really real possibility this is just devastating. And again, we're only 1 month away from the other box office disaster in the making, that is Snow White. So Disney, good luck with that. The Mum comes in with 199. Let's see here. Had a choice between Captain America or Paddington. The bear won. Well, I don't blame you.
You fought the bear and the bear won. You fought. No, I'm just. or bear one, cap 0. I don't know if that's the box score so far, but
in this case, the bear, that being Amazon, did win. Like you said at the top of the show here, Lou, Amazon MGM Studios shelled out an extra $1 billion plus to take control of James Bond franchise. What is next? The series. This deadline here.
Now, I will remind you that they paid this $1 billion plus, and it's going to be more going on because there's still participation, to people who only a couple of weeks ago were calling them, quote, idiots and, quote, a-holes, and who had talked about meetings where the Amazon people said, well, we don't think James Bond is really a hero. And they were just, and that's Cubby Broccoli's daughter, Barbara, and Michael Wilson, who have been stewarding the franchise low these many years since their dad went away. But somehow, after being so dismissive and so disgusted with Amazon, and Amazon, by the way, was involved at all because they had the distribution through MGM. And when Amazon bought MGM, they inherited that distribution deal. But they've decided that you're idiots, you're awful, you don't know you're anything. But if you pay me $1 billion, I might forget that and say nice things about you that you'll write, because I obviously didn't. And you know what? They've made their mark, and they've been doing this a long time, and maybe they just don't need the aggravation, and more power to them. But it's interesting how every story about anybody ever associated with this has, asked for a comment. For example, Timothy Dalton has a movie coming out, and he was being interviewed about that movie. But meanwhile, they said, well, what do you think? You played Bond. And he said nothing but nice things. He said he was shocked, but of course complimented the people that took care of him. And I thought he was one of the better Bonds, frankly. I thought when he brought it back to a tougher, harder edged reality from the Saint days, that it was a good thing. So anyway,
Yeah, Timothy Dalton didn't get a whole lot of credit when he was playing 007, which is a shame, because I think I agree with your assessment right there. In terms of rank, where would you rank all of the Bonds actually before we
oh
get going
golly,
here?
oh golly. Well, obviously Sean Connery is the guy, and it's not just that he originated it; it's that he personified it in a way that we all liked. That he was witty and charming and deadly at the same time. And that's not an easy thing to pull off. Right. I mean, to go from this fun, charming guy to that's a Smith & Wesson, you've had your six, bang. Which, of course, was a lot about the writing, too. But still,
sure,
he knew what to do with it. He just somehow knew what to do with it. And after him, there's everybody else. So... and also, I think as the movies change, we talked about this picture that was used to illustrate the Amazon news.
Yep.
To not put Connery in the middle, in the front, is to say we don't think our audience today cares as much about him as they do about Daniel Craig. And yes. Daniel Craig was fine, don't get me wrong, but the movies that he made were not so great, and they got worse as they went along. And the last one was, to a true fan like me, almost unwatchable. It was so wrong. So, is that because the IP has outlived its stay, or because the actor had, or the writers had, or the producers had? I don't know. I just know it wasn't what it should be. I would take the funny, slightly more fantastic, very more fantastic Roger Moore movies over that last one any day. There's a very interesting, it's out there on YouTube somewhere. I should have found the link for this, but I didn't. Of Pierce Brosnan talking through, giving notes, watching after years later, not for a special feature for a disc, but somebody just put him in front of a camera in his house in Hawaii and had him talk through GoldenEye. And it's really, really good. And his insights are really, really, really right on. So there's that. Oh, we have a jukebox selection for today, and we'll talk about it later. But meanwhile, I should give you, I'll put it back there in Slackland. The other thing about the James Bond movies, of course, are the music, the theme songs that started with John Barry and went through everybody else. This is a link I just gave you to a bunch of contemporary artists, but they're literally every James Bond song from start to finish. They're not all great interpretations of them, but it just gives you a sense of the range, from Dr. No to No Time to Die to everything in between. And wow, have they contributed to our culture, those songs. In some cases in the latter day because of who sang them, but mostly because they just became, you heard that music and you knew where you were. It set the stage. It put you in the place. Most people do not know that the original theme song, that guitar thing of ding 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 ding, was originally written as a Bollywood stage musical.
What?
That's right. He had written that as an Englishman writing it, but it had lyrics about I am so this and I am that, and it was never, and the show didn't happen, and so he had this tune lying around, and they said, well, what if you kind of jazzed it up with, and the rest, as they say, is guitar history. Wow. Somewhere, I'm sure it exists out there, but of course, John Barry. That was Monty Norman who wrote that one. John Barry wrote what they called the 007 theme, which was, That other theme. But the original guitar theme was originally Indian in style.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
really interesting. I had no idea.
And had these awful, endless lyrics. But look it up. You can find it somewhere out there. But meanwhile, this I thought was an interesting piece. I don't think they're all successful interpretations of the songs, but they do give you that stretch and that breadth of how much that music has meant. It's not just a bunch of movies. It's a culture. It's a well, in the best sense, the franchise, which of course nobody ever suspected was going to happen at the beginning. Indeed, the books were moderately successful. Now, remember, Ian Fleming had some experience in the intelligence world during World War II. He was not out there doing James Bond spy stuff. He was running spies, which is what the guys back in the headquarters do. But he also, as a journalist, attended the show trials that Stalin put on after the war to basically get rid of his enemies by saying they were collaborating with the Germans. And he saw what a totalitarian society would do. And he knew also that the agency that he used, SMERSH, which is an abbreviation of the Russian words Shmeriat Spionem, which means death to spies, was real. It was the wet work part of the KGB and GRU and whatever. And of course, then he invented Spectre, the special executive for counterterrorism, revenge, extortion. I forget. Anyway, Spectre, which was Blofeld and all of those good guys, bad guys. And mixed them in From Russia with Love, because in From Russia with Love, Rosa Klebb, the villainess with the little knives in her shoes, is officially a KGB officer, a SMERSH officer, but she's really working for Spectre. And anyway, it gets very complicated. It's amazing how densely complicated some of these plots are, that they were able to be put on the screen in a pretty straightforward manner. And I think a lot of that was good writing and directing, but most of it was the fact that you didn't have to know that Connery was the good guy and everybody else was the bad guy, and let's watch him win. Let's watch him win. But anyway, I don't know how far back you want to go, but basically Fleming had this idea for a character, and he said he wanted a name that was absolutely simple. And he happened to have a book on his desk at Goldeneye was his house in Jamaica that he'd retreat to in the bad weather in London. And there was this book called James Bond's Birds of the Caribbean or something like that. It was a bird watcher book. Right. And that's where he got the name James Bond. And interesting, the M character, the real guy who ran that part of the Secret Service in England, was an admiral named Miles Meservey. And that's where the M came from. And Q was a pretty standard equipment armorer kind of nickname in the British clandestine services. But there you go, Birds of the West Indies by James Bond. So he drew on all these real sources, but then gave it a spin. And they were pretty successful in England, but not a big deal in America, until the greatest thing you could ever have happen to you as a publisher in America happened. Somebody asked JFK what he was reading, and he said, well, I really like this James Bond guy in these books. And suddenly everybody in America, because of course they wanted to dress like Jackie and be cool like Jack, and they said, well, gee, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And the book sales went crazy. And that, in a large part, is why when Broccoli and Saltzman, these two producers who bought the rights, picked which movie they wanted to do first, that they did Dr. No, because the character in Dr. No, and there they are, Cubby and Harry and Sean and Ian signing the deal. He was doing something on behalf of the evil Soviets. He was beaming signals from his island located on a guano farm, which was basically a place that was processing bird crap, which was an industry in the Caribbean, believe it or not. But underneath it all, he was aiming beams at the American rockets to make them crash. And in the early days of our space program, we had a lot of failures. The Vanguard rocket was famous for falling off the launch pad when it launched and that sort of thing. Just like Elon has had crashes aplenty and said every time, it's kind of like the old Thomas Edison line about I've invented 1,500 ways not to make a light bulb.
Right.
Right.
There's something to be had from a failure like that. Just 1 second, Lou. Just 1 second. I don't mean to take you off track here. Just want to go ahead and have shout out to Storm Weaver here for the Canadian $50. Thank you so much. Good afternoon,
thank you.
And Lou Wasserman's Ghost. Hope all is well with you and yours. All the best from Canada. Goodbye, 007. With the sad face. Thank you.
But anyway, the explanation for how come our rockets weren't working was, well, it couldn't be us. It couldn't be Werner von Braun. It must be an evil genius doing nasty things. Now, in that movie, they had so much wit and style. If you watch Dr. No, and by the way, we of the genre guys have done an episode about it, the scene where Bond and his girl, Honeychild Ryder, come into Dr. No's underwater eyrie, his lair, where he has this massive glass window looking out at the ocean because it's underwater. They walk in, and over on one side, there is a painting on an easel, and he just kind of gives it a look and then keeps going. Well, that painting was a famous portrait that had been stolen in a robbery from the National Gallery or the Tate, I forget which, in London about 10 months before. So, of course, that was Americans didn't know about it, but for the British audiences, it was like, of course, Dr. No had it stolen. It couldn't have been an ordinary criminal. So they had a lot of wit. There you go, genre guys. You can watch it here on Dr. No. But anyway, and by the way, one of the things in there, you may wonder how Ursula Andress, who was a relatively unknown model at that time, got the job. Her headshot was one of the thousands that came into them to consider girls for the part. Hers had her hair wet. None of the others did. And they said, well, this woman comes out of the sea, as indeed they repeated with Halle Berry in Goldeneye. But that's how she originally got the job. So there you go. But it was made for a little less than $1 million, if you can imagine that.
What?
Yeah. It costs about $975,000 to make in, 66? Anyway, and it was a hit. And then they started the machine. There she was. Yeah. A mermaid, indeed. Not a little mermaid, a big mermaid.
She was quite the gal, especially as she indeed walks the beach with.
You don't expect a Swiss girl to be that comfortable on a beach, but somehow she managed without snow. No Alps.
Somehow she got around.
Yeah. But anyhow, and of course, also in that movie, we had the first instance of the many different castings of Felix Leiter, Bond's CIA pal, played by Jack Lord, later to be Hookham, Dano, McGarrett. Who Jack Lord is one of the games I like to play when I look at old movies is go to IMDb and look up the bios of the people in the movies. Do you know that Jack Lord was a merchant marine sea captain before he ever got into acting at a very young age?
Really?
So there's a strange little piece of trivia I learned doing that. But anyway, well, in our super chat, I see an interesting question. Maybe we should get to about the Thin Man series. Please. And the Ma and Pa Kettle series. There's Jack Lord.
Let me go ahead and get Eric Stratton here for the 777. Ooh, I like that. Thin Man movie series franchise.
Instead of 007, it's 777. That's a much better number. Thank you very much, Eric.
Absolutely. Thin Man movie series franchise has the same two leads through 6 movies and 14 years. Are there a longer series with consistency? Ma and Pa Kettle.
I don't think they ran about that long, maybe a little longer. I guess, it depends on how you define a series. If you talk about Abbott and Costello, or certainly Laurel and Hardy made a zillion movies, although most of them were shorts. But as far as the modern era, I would say Bond was the first to really, really become this. And we forgot to mention the very first instance of Bond on screen had nothing to do with any of these people.
Nothing
And
to do
that
with any of
was
it.
that in 19, what was it, 54? There was an anthology drama series called Climax. Probably a name you couldn't get away with now. I don't know. And in that, we had, of all people, Barry Nelson, a very American actor playing James Bond, and Peter Lorre, a very German actor playing Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. And they did some other weird things. Linda Christian, who you will know from a lot of movies, was Valerie Mathis. Now, as you know from especially the Craig movies, Mathis is the French secret agent that Bond is friends with from the Sûreté. So they jumbled and jived and basically did this. It exists on Kinescope because it was a live broadcast. And it's okay, but it's kind of fun that happened. Yeah, there are the pictures of Le Chiffre, which literally translated is the number. Chiffre doesn't really mean number, but it's kind of like in a card playing thing. So, this idea, there you go. You have to win. and the plot, by the way, of Casino Royale was that Le Chiffre was the paymaster for the Russians. But he liked to gamble. And so the idea was, well, why don't we beat him? Who's the best card player in the Secret Service? Answer, James Bond. We'll go take all his money away. And, well, you know the results. You've seen it several times now. Anyway, what else can we say? Where are we at in this convoluted story of all things Bond, which I'm jumbling all over the place? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We're in the 1950s now, and apparently, I kind of want to get into where Kevin McClory comes in.
Well, McClory is an Irish producer, come boom man, come assistant director, come golly, all different things. And I see Jan Monroe mentioning the David Niven one. We'll get to that one. But McClory comes to Fleming and says, listen, I think the character is great. I don't think any of your books would be good movies. Let's put together our own movie. And so they work together on a screenplay. And they involve another guy. I forget his name right now. And this is
Jack Whittingham.
Right. And meanwhile, Fleming has a deadline to hit to deliver a book manuscript to his publishers for the next book. And he hasn't got a good idea. And he says, well, I'll use this one. And that involves, of course, giving some credit to McClory, who wrote it with him. And that starts a chain of events that becomes very complicated and legally, over a period of 40, 50 years, there are lawsuits. And of course, part of it is that McClory gets the right to remake Thunderball. He gets a producer credit on the movie, but he gets a right to remake Thunderball. Right. But and then he gets involved in writing one called Warhead, that's a take on Thunderball. And golly, and then Sean Connery, who has left the series, of course, long before, after You Only Live Twice. And Michael Caine, who they've become buddies making The Man Who Would Be King, both get involved in maybe producing this thing called Warhead. And eventually the rights move along. And the movie Never Say Never Again is produced. And as I was telling you earlier, the producer, Jack Schwartzman, who was married to Talia Shire, who you all know as from the Godfather, or from Rocky, and really The Godfather, because, of course, she was Coppola's sister. I happen to know this guy, Jack Schwartzman, who produced it, because we went to the same barber, and we'd kibitz once in a while. But that movie, although it has its ups and downs, Among other things, when we talk about the local agent on scene, it's Mr. Bean. And also, God, why do I always forget his name when I get to this point? But the bad guy who plays Largo, who is a totally different kind of character than was in the original, is so good in this movie. And then it's got, well, all of Hollywood is 6 degrees of separation, right?
Of course.
Because notice in this scene, this guy who's about to try and kill Bond in the gym, you know who that is? That's
Who's
the
that?
big guy on the flying wing in Indiana Jones.
Oh,
Same guy. He was
wow.
he was a professional wrestler and part-time actor and like that. So
Yeah, and he did a whole bunch of stuff for Indiana Jones. I believe he's one of the only people that make reappearances in terms of casting for the first three films.
as different characters, of course.
Yeah.
And there, Carl Maria Brandauer, who's playing Largo, and Kim Basinger, who, of course, winds up in another franchise in the Michael Keaton Batman movie. Well, anyway, and of course, Max von Sydow is in it. And it's, Bond
Now-
25, yeah.
Now, so there's kind of a split here. It kind of goes three ways. So you have, obviously, we have Kim McClory, who I guess goes on to sue Ian Fleming and everything like that. Then you have Ian Fleming producing, I believe, involved in some way with the Casino Royale, like kind of it's.
Well, yes and no, because this Casino Royale happened because the rights were already out of their control because of that Barry Nelson thing, you see.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that book was out of the rotation, and then they decided, well, why don't we do a spoof? And so there you go. You got Peter Sellers as James Bond, and you have Ursula Andress as James Bond, and you had, of all people, Woody Allen as James Bond, and David Niven as James Bond. And it's a hot mess, but it's fun.
5 directors on this film, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy.
And Burt
production story.
Bacharach doing the music.
Insane.
And
Really?
Orson Welles
I
as
didn't know
Lashiffer.
that.
Oh yeah, sure. And the song that came out of it, of course, was "The Look of Love," which became a huge, huge hit all by itself. Oh yeah, Bill Holden, Charles Boyer, John Huston,
Wow.
George Raft, Jean-Paul Belmondo, Terrence Cooper, Barbara Boucher, plus a Bond wagon of gorgeous girls. Well, wouldn't there be?
Yeah.
It's a silly piece of junk, but it's a fun, silly piece of junk. If you're ever desperate for entertainment some night, watch that. But the music is the standout, I think. So you're saying.
Well, I don't think it's quite the visuals, because I think this movie did not do well when it came out, right? It was
well, people who expected a James Bond movie didn't get one, and people who wanted a funny movie got one that tried too hard, in my opinion, to be funny. And certainly, well, I mean, Woody Allen was not a draw. Peter Sellers was not a draw in America. And so, yeah, well, there you go. And then, of course, Austin Powers, Ken is mentioning, is a different take. But it was just a weird piece of, and why are we showing one of my favorites here, which is
I don't know.
I guess it's just going to keep rolling. Maybe we should do something else. But yeah, we're just going
to. So then, but at the same time that is all going on, Albert, Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman get involved, and they both purchase the film rights for the James Bond series going forward, and they start
and they make Dr. No, and it's a monster hit. Yeah, which tells them, well, we should make some more, and then they make From Russia with Love, and that's a monster hit, and that's the last one that Fleming has any contact with. He's there on the set, but didn't make it. And then what is perhaps the one that really, really, really finally made the whole formula gel, which is Goldfinger. which
Goldfinger.
certainly on the list of all the Bond movies goes to the top of the class from almost everybody, and rightly so, I believe. Although Goldfinger is an interesting movie compared to the book, because in the book, Goldfinger's buddies, they're all mafia gangs in America that are helping to do the Fort Knox thing. In fact, what most people do not know is that Fleming was also consulting with the guys that were making The Man from U.N.C.L.E. to be an American Bond. And the name Napoleon Solo that Robert Vaughn plays in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that's the name of the guy that gets crushed in the car. As a mobster. They just sort of recycled it. And then, of course, names like April Dancer are obvious Bond kind of names. Anyway.
Now, Goldfinger is especially relevant now because everybody wants to take a look at Fort Knox, which is a fascinating thing. And I think but before this movie, I don't think anybody really knew what Fort Knox was.
Well, and the movie had no access to the real Fort Knox. The Fort Knox you see in the movie was a mock-up built in England, the outside of the building, and the inside was totally an imagined set by Ken Adam, who did all the wonderful sets for the early Bond movies. Now, this scene is fascinating as far as the original scene in the book. As you know, he says, "Do you expect me to talk?" He says, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die."
Yes.
Now, in the book, remember, Bond has encountered him at the golf course. He's encountered him again on the roads of Switzerland as he's following him with that homing device. And this is their third encounter. And what Goldfinger says to him in the book is not, "I expect you to die," and all of that. He says, "They have a saying in Chicago, Mr. Bond. Once is happenstance. Twice, coincidence. Third time, enemy action. Goodbye." And he walks away. So
interesting. Do we get into the Shirley Eaton?
The painted gold thing. Yeah, that was, Fleming was also a journalist to some degree and did all these interesting books about things around the world and learned oddball facts that he shoved into these stories. Shirley Eaton is painted with gold, and it was a common dancer's bit. But the secret was that you had to keep a small patch of skin at the base of the spine unpainted so that the skin could breathe, and if not, it killed you. And that's where that all happened in this book, in this movie.
I see. Mythbusters went into it a little bit, and I can't remember the experience, but apparently it was pretty uncomfortable to be painted completely in that paint right there.
Well, I mean, it's girls in franchises get painted colors. Remember Yvonne Craig, Batgirl, was green in Star Trek in the original series. So what the heck?
Indeed. Oh, there's
see? If it had been modern, they'd have said, "Oh, you're discriminating against colored girls by killing her." So, even if the color's gold. But anyway, that was probably a little too political for this party, but what the heck?
So I believe I forget the film, so I do apologize. But while Sean Connery is playing James Bond very famously on the production of one of the films, I think it's like the last one before it takes a little bit of a hiatus, he announces to everybody that this is going to be his last film, and that causes a lot of controversy.
Well, he did that in reaction primarily to the paparazzi in Japan when they were making You Only Live Twice. They made his life a living hell, and his wife was there with him, and everywhere, if he stuck his head out anywhere, there were 5,000 guys chasing him, and he got really fed up with that and said, "That's all. Thank you. Goodbye." So that's why that happened. And it wasn't, I'm being typecast, because he was making all kinds of other movies by then in totally different roles.
Okay. So that's a little bit of a wives' tale.
And that movie, my God, what a production. I mean, that whole volcanic crater where the missiles were hiding, they built all that on the Backlot in England, for God's sakes. That was life size. Yes.
This is the
Yeah.
this is the famous one where they actually put prosthetics on to Sean Connery to make him look more Japanese, if I recall.
Well, on purpose, because he's supposed to be playing a Japanese fisherman
Right.
in one scene.
But
But
it's a choice.
well,
it's
but see,
it's
there's
really
this great.
something.
It was one of my favorite lines of dialogue in that movie. When he's Tiger Tanaka, the head of the Japanese Secret Service, invites him over, and they're
Mhm,
being catered to by a bunch of geisha girls, and
mhm.
the girls are all giggling, and he says, "You know why they are laughing, Bon-san?" And he says, "Why?" He says, "Because of your hairy chest." He says, Japanese men are totally without body hair on that part of the body. I
Mhm.
forget the exact line. And James Bond says back, he says, Tiger, there's an old saying, bird not make nest in barren tree. Old
Oh,
Japanese saying.
oh
And there's a whole
man.
thing with the Osato chemicals, and he pretends he wants the license for their formula for monosodium glutamate. And this is the scene, this fight scene, where he's running from these guys across the rooftops.
Uh-huh.
Oh God! And then of course she says, "Mr. Osato believes in a healthy chest," and he says, "Well, I agree with him." But that's the scene with the bird not
Right.
make nest in barren tree. Uh,
That is
Anyway, and one of the better theme songs too. You Only Live Twice with
yeah. Yeah. You were gonna say
Nancy
about the rooftop
Sinatra.
scene.
Oh God, it's this amazing, wonderfully choreographed tracking shot from a helicopter. The days
Ooh.
before we had drones to shoot these things, where
Ooh.
all of these guys are converging on him on these warehouses in the harbor in Japan, and it's just the music, the camera work, the choreography of it. It's not CGI. It's real, and it reads as real. And of course, Donald Pleasance as Blofeld is a lot of fun in this thing. Um, and the
Wow.
piranhas and the caverns and the well. And by the way, a future Blofeld is in this as Dicko Mortensen, the Japanese branch agent for the British Secret Service. Um, anyway,
So I guess we should skip ahead just a little bit in
okay,
the
you're
Bond
you
timeline
drive the
here.
train. I'm just here to react. So
Oh no, you're fine, you're fine. I want to skip ahead just a little bit because I well, first of all, James Bond really wasn't a thing for me up until Pierce Brosnan takes up the role for, I believe, GoldenEye, which is pretty big. But at this point in time, what is it? I believe the children of Broccoli get involved as producers for this,
yeah,
which
and
which
they've been
are
they've been working on the films even before Daddy died, but yeah, and they
right.
took it in a different direction, but a good different direction. And we're very, very protective of this character and this franchise. And this is also when these opening scene crazy stunts really began to happen. The ski jumps and the bungee jumps and anyway.
Yes, and it's questionable decisions made with the Pierce Brosnan films, but
Well,
I actually really liked him as James Bond. I guess I grew up with him, so there's obviously some bias and
yeah,
nostalgia
we
there.
all tend to sort of latch on to the one that was it when we were. I
Right.
remember when I went to see the very first Roger Moore movie. A friend of mine and I were sort of traveling across country. We happened to be in, I guess it was, I think Toronto. We went to see it, and of course, it didn't have Barry's music. It had George Martin doing the music with Paul singing the theme song, and that was kind of strange. But yeah, this was some fun stuff. Uh, yeah,
Now,
pay
now
attention
Roger
to
Moore,
4-7.
I think, is widely accepted as like the true successor to Sean Connery. I know there was
Well, and they wanted him earlier. Lazenby was like third choice, but these other people were. They wanted Pierce Brosnan a lot earlier, but he couldn't get out of his deal on Remington Steel.
okay, I know that.
And twice is the only way to live, Ken. Yeah, absolutely. Uh,
But then you have the 1970s movies, which are I would say fall pretty in line with the earlier 1960s Sean Connery films. And then I guess in the 80s they take a little bit of a darker turn in order to.
well, they said, well, if we're going to have a new actor, we're going to go in a different direction. And then, of course, when they started with Daniel Craig, it was literally a reboot back to the beginning, showing how he got his 00.
Which do you think was appropriate?
Yeah, it was time. It was time, especially after some of these. But after Louis Jourdan saying "Octopussy, Octopussy" over and over again, it got a little silly.
And that's the first Daniel Craig film is finally a true Casino Royale, which I think Bond faithful very much appreciate.
Yeah, it's pretty close to the original in plot. Oh, and one other thing everybody should know is that you can't make a Vesper anymore. Darn it. The Vesper was the cocktail, the name, he named it after Vesper Lind, that Fleming invented. There are a lot of things that have come out of this. The Vesper is a very, very complicated, very powerful martini. It's 3 parts gin, 1 part vodka, and 1 part what was called Quina Lillet. Now, Quina Lillet was not really a vermouth and not really an aperitif, but the original Lillet had quinine in it, kind of like tonic water. And they changed the formula because people didn't like the bitterness, and so you can't get it anymore, which means you can't make it anymore. And darn it, it was a good drink. The other thing, of course, that came out of these movies was that Fleming was relatively inexperienced in things having to do with guns. And after the first one, where in the books Bond was carrying a Beretta, he got a letter from a guy who was a real armorer saying that's not enough gun for this guy. It doesn't have enough power. And that's when he switches to the Walter PPK, which I own one. I do.
Well,
I
hey,
do.
It's a nice stylistic choice as well, I think.
Yeah, well, and of course that's neither. That's a looks like a Webley to me. But
that's just Ian Fleming. But
yeah.
But let me see if I can get James Bond with his signature. It's still here to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about. And
well, somewhere I've got a picture of mine. Let me see if I can find it. If you want to see what
I know, if I do firearms just by themselves, it puts us in an entirely different category with Google. But I'm sorry.
Well, there's a Walter, and because it's of course the Walter like I've got from Europe was chambered in the NATO size. It's still relatively small. The idea being that you could conceal it and wear it in a shoulder holster, but I can't find mine right now. Anyway, marvelous gun. Let me tell you about the Walther. Has anyone here ever held in their hand the original Coca-Cola bottle? Putting aside the issue of what kind of sugar is in it and where it's from and all of that, that bottle just somehow fits your hand. Mm-hmm. Well, so does this gun. I always describe it as being like a Coke bottle for a gun because it just fits, at least my hand. Anyway, and I have no other things to say other than it's a very effective protection device. I got mine. One of my assistant directors had worked on a movie in Germany with a German cop, and it was his standard issue cop gun that he sold to my friend over in Europe, and he brought it back and sold it to me. So there you go. It was a standard. The PP stands for police positive, and that's what it was designed to be. It was a cop's gun. So there you go. And which is funny considering that Dr. No famously dismisses Bond. He says, "I thought you would be more interesting, but you're just another stupid policeman."
Well, and the PPK is definitely synonymous with Bond for sure. I think another thing that's synonymous with Bond is it's the Aston Martin, perhaps.
There you go, the DB5. And I knew somebody who had one, and I said, "Yeah, it's beautiful, but how does it drive?" And he said, "Like a 70-year-old car." When he had it. In other words, yeah, for its time, it was very fine, but suspension-wise and otherwise, not so much. And yeah, they kept upgrading and then getting sponsorships from BMW for a while. There's that scene in the Pierce Brosnan movie where that BMW runs around a garage all by itself. It's kind of fun.
I like the moment in Skyfall where Daniel Craig finally gets a classic DB5 there. And
oh yeah, when it's hiding in that garage that he's had to put it away all those years, and he takes M in it.
I like that. It's a nice touching.
So all of these things, I mean, look at how much of an impact on our culture, on our society, on our
even in Hollywood, right? So Mission Impossible wouldn't be a thing without James Bond at all. There's
Tom F. That's close. It's Kurtz, Kurt, which is short. Yes. Anyway.
Definitely influence from Jean Le Carré and
Le Carré was a different kettle of fish altogether, but certainly Len Dayton. Well, think about Kurt being curtness, Tom, and that's where you get the R in there. Easy to remember. Yeah, I like Tomorrow Never Dies too, Ken. I really do, and in fact, when we did the Genre Guys, I guess it wasn't Genre Guys. I wrote a review for that parkplace.com of this awful Star Wars thing with Michelle Yeoh. And I thought, God, back when she was something and they let her be something instead of this stupid movie. But anyway, that's a fun picture. And again, because they got great people to be the bad guys too. People with some charm and some,
guys you love to hate.
Yeah, well, certainly. Tomorrow Never Dies with, why can't I think of his name? Silly me. Wonderful actor. Yeah, Stealth, right. And by the way,
Jonathan Pryce?
And Jonathan Pryce and Terry Hatcher. I met her a couple of times because her then guy was in a show that I was doing. Mm-hmm. Folks, you have no idea how tiny she is. I mean, she should be getting all the parts that Warwick Davis is the wrong sex for. She's that small, almost. But on the screen, she comes across bigger. And I'll leave that in there. But
my favorite Terry Hatcher story is when she went to Disneyland and she got a tour of Walt's apartment, and she just wanted to look outside the window. So she takes that lamp right there that's, famously never out, right? And she just unplugs it and moves it to the side so she can look at the window to Main Street.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
But when you talk about visiting, Sean Connery was in L.A. and went to Disneyland when he was promoting Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which was the movie in which the Bond people saw him that first got them interested in him. So without that, there's 6 degrees of Disneyfication. But he said, coming out later and looking at the building now with the 7 dwarfs, he said, "Oh yeah, that Kremlin that they built."
Yes, the Kremlin. Oh man. So I think
I have no idea where we are, where you want to go next, but I'm
no. I think it's important to recognize that Barbara Broccoli and
Michael Wilson.
Michael Wilson were very instrumental in maintaining I think, the franchise and maintaining, I think, a lot of the characteristics that we've come to know and appreciate with the James Bond franchise. And so I think
Well,
that's
and
why.
they weren't shy about spending money. Everybody who ever worked on one of these movies talked about what a luxurious experience it was for the cast, for the crew, for everybody involved. And that gave people that sense of being in Bond's world of, martinis and Astons and great hotels, and which was important. I've said on here many times before that when you watch a movie that's bad, the first thing you get a sense of is that everybody working on it, from the grips to the catering to whatever, was punching a clock and showing up and going home, but not having any fun.
Right.
You never got that on a Bond film, at least not till that last awful one.
And I think they were pretty outspoken about, like, okay, James Bond can't be a woman, for example, because it's just not consistent with that character.
That's right.
I think there was a lot of,
Oh, teased us with there's going to be a female 00, and well, see, where I think they started to go wrong was when they decided to make these things connect, as far as a wonderful actor Chris Waltz, but the Blofeld thing carrying through.
yes,
It's not a serial; it's a series of missions, and when you limit it, all right, you give it a cohesion, but you also limit what the bad guy's up to. I think that's my.
I think you're right about that, because it's not quite a serial. It is, a series of independent missions that you can kind of, check in and check out of, kind of thing. And so when you do have this connective tissue from one movie to another, in almost like a Marvel MCU way, I think you do take away. There's something lost there. I can't quite describe what it is. And especially too, I mean, if you want somebody to jump in on these films, people now, it's like, okay, do I have to see the previous ones in order to find these connections right here? I think it does a disservice to the film that you're trying to present.
I'm looking. Pardon me while I digress, but people are talking. Jay Question is asking, how do they get away with Octopussy? And Citizen 427 is talking Pussy galore. There was we talked about all the various spy spoofs, but we forgot to mention Jason King, a British show with Peter Wingard, who was, and he plays a guy who's a real spy whose life is that he writes spy novels. And in one of his novels, he makes the girl character a character named Kitten Abundant instead of Pussy Galore. Yeah. I always thought that was a great piece of Bond spoofing. Kitten Abundant.
Is this what
Kitty Abundant, I think.
Right here? Anyway. Is that the one?
Right. I'm out of sync somehow, but
oh. Still there, Lou? Lou. Uh-oh. You might have lost Lou. Or maybe we lost me. I don't know. Who do you hear out of the two here, chat? Very much apologize.
That's good. Well, I'm seeing
Lou?
A stuttering situation. Darn.
Oh. Yeah, I think you're coming in and out a little bit. You're both
I
hate
hate that.
Yeah.
Although that's a Bond characteristic too, if I can be so bold.
Well, that's a fair.
Well, that point. One you heard. See. Anyway, there we go. I think we're back to something resembling normal.
Yes. So let's go ahead and read a little bit about what's happening today over the Bond franchise. This by PJ Media. I thought that was a pretty good summation of everything that's going on by Rick Moran. Amazon has purchased creative control over the James Bond film franchise. James Bond is about to enter uncertain waters as Amazon.com, which purchased MGM 4 years ago for $8.5 billion, has now assumed creative control over the franchise. And that's the thing, too. When we went over the MGM Studios piece that we had here on Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you, we talked about how, the MGM that Amazon purchased is kind of a, I don't know, it's
A shell of
it
its
wasn't
former leonine self, I think.
correct. Yes, yes. And I think the only thing that was really the most valuable there was probably James Bond. And
Well,
so the fact that they
especially
didn't actually
because
do
a
that
lot of the old movie libraries of these various studios have been passed around over the years. I
exactly.
mean, Ted Turner bought everything that was Warner Brothers pre 49 or 50, something like that. So, you know,
And
um,
MGM famously sold off so many things over the, I don't know, latter half of the
including the
20th century there.
Backlot to Sony. Uh,
Yes, yes,
they
indeed.
sold the
Amazon
studio.
Amazon reportedly paid an extra $1 billion just for the Bond films. What they craved, however, was greater control of the Bond brand. Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, the heads of Eon and custodians of everything related to James Bond, entered into a joint venture with Amazon MGM. The Broccoli's will retain an ownership stake in Bond and his films, but Amazon MGM will be in the driver's seat creatively. That means, in all likelihood, maybe perhaps woke changes to the character with possibly a female Bond and certainly a Bond of a different color. That has been
I
speculated for
can't
a
help it.
long time.
That sentence reminds me of The Wizard of Oz. Well, that's certainly a Bond of a different color, or the horse of a different color. But the big thing that they didn't want to do that Amazon is very likely to do is spin off TV series, a Q series, a Moneypenny series. So,
Right.
I mean, in other words, to do everything wrong that Paramount's done with Star Trek and that Marvel's done with the MCU.
Hopefully that answers Siriate's question right here. Will they serialize it? I think that's a, you know, I think it's a thing that's definitely going to happen. Variety had this to say about the clash between the Broccoli's and Amazon here. Rumors have swirled for years that the Broccoli's have clashed with Amazon over the direction of Bond. The family felt the e-commerce giant was a poor home for the elegant secret agent and bristled at its efforts to expand the scope of the franchise. While Amazon executives were frustrated by the glacial pace of getting a new film off the ground, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal, the company managed to get the Broccoli's to sign off on a reality competition spin-off show, 007 Road to a Million, but
Which
other
was
attempts to revitalize the property have yet to bear fruit. Yeah, okay. So how bad was that?
How bad was that? Was even having Brian Cox in it couldn't save it. Let's put it that way. So
No good right there. Revitalize the property is a showbiz talk for bringing James Bond to the 21st century, or at least the left's notion of 21st century. Quote, this is the next logical step for the Bond franchise. 007 is the crown jewel in Amazon's library and their best hope in terms of IP for continued box office successes, says Jeff Brock, an analyst with exhibitor relations. With the old guard, for better or for worse, productions took a long time to incubate. That just doesn't cut it in today's theatrical marketplace. What do you think of that?
like I say, I'm not holding my breath. Although, as I say, I think that the duo screwed up on the last movie too. But
Yeah.
still,
So now you have Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon here, putting out a big old tweet. Who'd you pick as the next Bond? And I think the individual that has everybody kind of unified in seeing as the next Bond is Henry Cavill. Now, what do you think about all of that, there, Lou?
you mean a white British guy? How dare they? Um,
It's a bold choice. It is a bold choice, especially in the 21st century.
God, this guy's got so many things on his plate. He can just sort of say, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that one this year, and this one next year, and this one next year," and more power to him. I like him. I didn't always, and he's made some movies that was somebody mentioned in the chat that he played Napoleon Solo in that awful feature of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. But I mean, can you be all of these characters to everybody? I don't know.
It's an interesting question.
On the other hand, if Bezos had to know what the answer was going to be before he asked the question, and if you think If he put that question out there totally blind without actually having some sort of contact with Cavill's agent way ahead of doing it, he doesn't want to be put in a position of, oh gosh, now I got to hire the guy no matter how much money he wants.
Sure.
He's a smart businessman. He picks strange-looking girlfriends, but that's another story.
Oh, no.
Well, you know.
Oh, no. Where's the Zuckerberg memes?
Oh, yeah, right. Anyway, hell, nobody really knows what will come. That's the bottom line on this thing. Nobody really knows. Even Bezos doesn't know. All that the duo know is that they're very handsomely paid for it. So
now, to end our show and this long journey in the Bond franchise right here, which is awesome, by the way, Lou. I can't tell you how appreciative I am for you coming with your expertise on this, because I know James Bond means a lot to you, and to get your passion on recording here is fantastic. But there's been a lot of speculation surrounding the theme park inclusion of James Bond, specifically with that new Universal UK park, which we did get a little bit of a glimmer of hope there with that New York Times article.
Everybody talks about it, but I haven't heard anybody at Universal actually say that that's a possibility.
Right.
And it seems to me everybody's talked about a Lord of the Rings land there, and obviously another Harry Potter land. And at what point do the Brits say, okay, enough with the Brit stuff, give us something from somewhere else? You know,
that's a good point.
And I don't know if that's like a bridge too far as far as, well, I don't know. See, what is it? It says green light the purchase. Yeah, and God, what would it cost? Where we're at, by the way, in the UK with Universal is that it's been awaiting all the various government permissions, and allegedly they've got them, or they're about to be able to announce that they've got them.
Yeah.
And so when that comes out, along with the announcements on Vegas for the horror thing and Plano for the kids park, which came out this week with what IP is going to be there specifically. Who knows? But it seems to me to be unlikely. I just, I don't think, I mean, on the one hand, you'd say, well, the Brits are going there to celebrate all of their wonderful IPs. On the other hand, the purpose of this park, remember when Disneyland Paris opened, part of the draw was, well, we'll get all those people from England to come across the channel and people from all over the rest of Europe. Well, This has got to be looking to draw in the opposite direction. It can't just survive on a domestic audience in England alone. I mean, it can survive, but not thrive. So I don't know. And then the question becomes, well, what exactly do you do with a Bond land? Do you do London in the 60s? Or do you do now? Or, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously there are creative people who could make it work and be wonderful, as we know from what they've done with Epic and their other work of late.
Sure.
But I don't see it as the right fit personally. But that's just me.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up, because I think you're totally right. The UK park really needs to thrive by being a place for all of Europeans and maybe even all of the world to go out and see. How does that work if it is so very based in UK and English type fare? I'm not quite sure.
Well, and a good example, as I think about it, is what happened with Harry Potter at Epic. They thought they were going to go in the direction of the Fantastic Beasts movies. They decided we're not going to make any more of those, but they kept the Parisian atmosphere of the streets. They just made the ride happen in England, and you go through a magical green flame and you're there, which is a great solution, because if they'd have made one more, look, what are you going to do? You've done Diagon Alley, you've done Gringotts, you've done Hogwarts, you've done all of those things. Paris is different. And it draws a whole different atmosphere, and it gives you opportunities as far as shops and food and everything else. But
Totally
how do you
agree.
do that again? Do
Good
you do
question.
see, because if Fantastic Beasts was still a thing, you'd do probably the New York branch in England.
Yeah.
But again, in New York, and at a certain point, it all becomes uh, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s American big city thing, uh, which is also the London in the 60s thing, except with miniskirts and Carnaby Street. I was, by the way, we did the next genre guys that we did was a movie called A Shock to the System with Michael Caine, and I was watching an interview with Michael Caine, and you want a funny thing he said. His mother was a Cockney charwoman, a cleaning lady, and once he started to get successful, he told
Mm-hmm.
her she needed to quit because he had all the money in the world and would take care of her. And she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't do it because she said, what would I do all day? I have to have somewhere to be. So he said his mother was a real character. And he says at one point his mother would ask him things about the greater world beyond her circle. And she asked him one day, well, what are these? I keep reading about something called a mini skirt. And Michael Caine said, well, on Saturday, I guess I'll take you to London to the King's Road and you'll see some. So they went. And he pointed out a girl in a very, very, very short miniskirt. And he said, well, what do you think, Mom? And his Cockney mom said, quote, well, I think if it's not on sale, you shouldn't put it in the store window. There's some basic Cockney wisdom for you, right?
Oh boy.
So, oh God.
Oh man. Oh goodness gracious. Well, I don't know about all that, but hey, Ken Reinhardt says volcano layer. Interesting.
Volcano.
Interesting idea.
In England. I would think if you're going to go with English historical stuff, you might do the Romans or the Normans or some of the various folks who've conquered the place, certainly Vikings. And that's, of course, you've got Vikings with Isle of Burke, so I don't know.
It's an interesting web that we weave, Mr. Bond.
Yes.
With all of this, and I am.
You're not going to do Dunkirk land, You're not going to do
No.
Battle of the Bulgeville.
Paddington. You can do Paddington.
Yeah, maybe. I guess for a kid's land, maybe so.
Yeah.
Or Blue Peter, or some of the other English kid stuff. What about? I wish they'd do. I don't know how they go about it, but Thunderbirds are go.
Oh,
that would be fun.
Okay.
A supermarionation based land. If you're going to pick British IP, there you go. One that hasn't really been done. That would be fun. And that's Amazon again, because they did the animated version most recently. So there you go.
There you go. I like that. I'll come back around. Now, I want to go ahead and just tease people a little bit, and we might get into this on T3PO Live.
We still haven't given
Tuesdays,
them the official Jukebox thing either, so we got to get to that.
Oh, yes. Let's go ahead and get that up right now.
Okay. Well, so folks, in all of our talking lately about the Disney parks, we bemoan the fact that they have diluted, degenerated, despair. They're tearing down the river. They're tearing down the Muppets. They're tearing down so many things. To me, a big part of the classic park attractions and atmosphere and attitude is the music. And I found a guy, a Dutch guy, whose name is GJI. It's pronounced Hish. Anyway, he plays piano wonderfully. And he's put together a 3-part video of him playing a medley of all of the music of EPCOT, including most, if all, of the original themes. And it's just glorious. It's just really, really wonderful. And I thought, as a change of pace from movies, although we've already earlier given you that Bond one, you'll see in the comments, in the description, wherever, these 3 files. And I tell you what, God, there's such great music and memories in there for anybody who ever loved, believed in the positive, optimistic view of the future that was EPCOT and World Showcase for that matter. So there you go. That's what we chose this week. It's got everything.
The apparently we were just talking to Joshua Paris off screen. He was telling us that he provided help with the visuals for this. So
yes,
in part Joshua Harris production, which is pretty cool. And all three of the parts are going to be in both the chat right now. Just put them in there and the description as well. So I would recommend.
So if you just want to just turn on your YouTube and listen to some beautiful music that'll bring some memories, making memories. There's one of them. The old imagination stuff. Yeah.
Indeed.
But also, it has the various fireworks shows and the fountain shows, and even music that was written but not used by some of the guys who wrote the original stuff. Bob Moline, there's an unused song on here. So anyway, it's really beautiful, and you'll like it. And even if you never were at EPCOT or knew what EPCOT was, you'll get a sense of it from this. So enjoy that.
Very cool. I've listened to the pieces. They're remarkable, awesome stuff. You'll get a bunch of nostalgia there. Speaking of nostalgia, though, T3PO Live, talking about theme parks and all kinds of nostalgia and the future of them, of course. That'll be switching from its old slot on Thursdays to now Tuesdays. Tuesdays at 3... is it 3 p.m. Eastern? Wait.
Yeah.
Following the pro
after the pro show
starts at yes
12 to 3 and 3 to whenever we wander on to. So don't tune up your TV set. Don't let yourself forget T3PO Hound.
That park. I like that. Park Place Morning Magic at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then the pro show at noon, and then you don't touch that dial, you'll be redirected directly into T3PO Live. Very, very cool right there. Going to be talking about a lot of Universal stuff, and to tease people, I think I might get the green light before the show. I'm not sure, but Islands of Adventure is a very interesting park that has a lot of potential, obviously. We've talked about a lot about about Zelda possibly coming to the Lost Continent area. Well, I have heard from a good inside source that maybe it's on the back burner, and maybe another land in that area might be on the front burner when it comes to future expansion and redo. Lou, I'll tell you after the show, you will not.
See, I get all the good dirt because I hang around this guy. You guys get the secondhand dirt from us when we can eventually tell you about it. But
when I heard the idea, I was like, that is a game changer. So hopefully, like I said, I get the green light before then. And, we have a good nice little rumor scoop there for T3PO Live. Again, it's live at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays now. Going to be a really fun show talking about all of what's coming to Universal Studios in the future. Let me see right here. Who do we have as live streaming right now that we can redirect to? Let me see. Give me a second to figure out here what's all upcoming for everybody. Okay.
And by the way, if you haven't caught up on all the stuff they released about Epic, about the food in this past week or so, stay hungry, my friends.
yes. Epic food looks actually really, really good. Especially the, the steakhouse over there at Darkmoor.
Yeah.
Looks good. Looks really, really good. I love that a lot.
And some unusual pizzas at that pizza place, Pizza Moon, too. Some really unusual ones. Although one of them, and Lorena agrees, Lorena was raving about this honey barbecue pizza at the Stella. Which one was she at? The Stella Nova? Mm-hmm. Apparently they're going to have that over there, too. And so there you go. I thought it was a funny week because they were showing, in BioReconstruct's aerial shots that Alicia Stella does great commentary on, all of the installation of the Coke freestyle machines all over the park. And that's the same week that it was uncool at Epcot because a bunch of the flavors disappeared. So, the Lord giveth soda pop and the Lord taketh away, depending on where you be at the time.
I will say, so you got the refillable mugs that you can take in the theme park over there at Universal Studios.
Although I'm told that the one at the hotel doesn't work in the park or vice versa. So
yeah, which I don't like.
But makes sense. It's a different piece of accounting, But
the ones in the park, the freestyle machines in the park, are usually, because it's so hot, they really can't get the temperature down on those machines. And
I'm sure they found a way.
I've had limited success. I always recommend people go to the stands and people actually serving drinks, because that will fill your refill mug.
Well, I've never used a freestyle machine. Isn't there a button for ice of some kind or not?
There is, but it's just too warm. It's just too warm, Lou.
You mean it's too hot to go to a theme park in the summertime in Orlando? Thank you, Bob, for that insight.
Yes. Indeed. Let me see here. Where do we? I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to find something for us. Hold on a second.
Well,
what do you have coming up on genre, guys? There, Lou. I know you mentioned it before, but for people,
we just did Shock to the System, which we were interesting to discover that although it came from a book, the screenplay was written by Andrew Klavan, of all people, and it shows his wit, certainly. The next one, I think I know what it's going to be, but we haven't yet totally confirmed it, so I would rather not say, although it will be, sooner or later. But I think the next one is going to be the Our Man Flint movies, and we're going to do both of them as a double feature. And we may have a special guest host on that, too, that's known to all lovers of things monsterish. So we'll see. But I know here, when is My Favorite Beef movie going up?
Yes, the Alvarez Kelly will be coming out. I'm going to try to get out tomorrow. That's what I'm going to shoot for here. But unfortunately, I'm a little bit behind here. I was up until like 5 in the morning last night, actually, editing videos. But it's okay, though.
And then what's after that? Do we know?
I have to figure that out. I thought, if I remember correctly, I thought it was Superman, actually. The one that you did actually with Marvin Montanaro.
You will believe a man can fly.
Yes. And rightfully so. Very, very good stuff there. And it looks like I found a live stream. We're going to go ahead and redirect you over to... he's not live yet. It goes live... Looks to be about an hour and a half, but Theme Park Casual will be visiting Knott's Berry Farm, so that should be a whole lot of fun.
Well,
absolutely,
we doed it.
So we doed it indeed. So definitely stick around on this channel right here by subscribing. Got some amazing content in the works right here, and also too, if you haven't yet liked this video, well, go ahead, please like that video. It helps us out tremendously.
Yes, if you like us, click the like. If you don't tell anyone.
Exactly. We're gonna be like 007. We're gonna be covert if you don't like us here.
Hey, a guy just drove up with a gun and a sports car, and the seat ejects. You don't suppose he's a spy, do you? No.
Pretty strong likelihood.
Pretty strong likelihood. History of spying, but hey, it's okay. It's all good. Well, then I guess we'll leave you shaken, stirred, or otherwise, and see you next time, everybody. Same bond time, same bat channel, whatever, 2:00 on Sundays. We get together here almost every Sunday. There'll be a couple interruptions down the road for me to take a little sabbatical. But other than that, we're here. Send your questions. Did we give them the email address yet?
Oh, we have not actually. Let's go ahead and get that email out here because we love your questions indeed. It's going to be t3ponline@yahoo.com. This is all your questions and anything you would like us to include in the show, and we'll definitely take them up right there. Remember, folks, not anything about personally with Lou, but he can definitely speak on at least some of his experiences within the industry right there.
Did we clear the decks as far as super chats or what have you? I hope so, because we're about to go away. There we go.
Samuel Maine comes in very late with a $3.
And where is that sunny Maine? In Spain? No, not really.
Indeed. Thank you.
The main on the channel stays mainly on the super stickers, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed. And thank you for everybody who contributed to the show in any way. That includes Eric Stratton right there. That includes Storm Weaver. Amazing. I wish I had this great Storm Weaver clip right there that the Pro Show has. But I'm going to have to go get that from him eventually. The mom here and Mark Daly, of course. Thank you so much for everybody supporting our channel right here. Definitely, like I said, subscribe, like the video if you haven't liked the video yet. Email us as you know.
As the heart may prompt, as they used to say about the silent prayer moments in the service.
Indeed.
Okay.
And we will see you all next time here on Hollywood Backlot. Lou and you. Take care, everybody.